I just realized my audio was off this whole time. Sorry about that, guys. Let's start that over. I totally apologize. A little sleepy this evening. My name is Josh Satt. Welcome to Growers Live. This is the No-Till Growers channel, and we're really happy to have you. Tonight we have Shawn Jadrnicek of Wild Hope Farm in Chester, South Carolina. Super awesome farmer, one of my favorites. I've actually been to his farm and met Shawn. Very cool guy. I have a couple of announcements to start off with, and so let's get into that briefly. I already have a delay from not turning the sound on, so I apologize for that. First of all, big announcement for No-Till growers. Jesse and I have decided to drop the paywall for the video content that is over there. It was an idea of ours to generate a video content because we think it's a really cool thing to have, but we offered it as an incentive for Patreon members to sign up, and we're just realizing that we want to provide that content for everybody. So it's not really YouTube-y kind of content. It's more detailed, nerdy, specific content from farms that we visited. And so we're going to be putting that out on this channel, the No-Till Growers channel, most likely 2 a week. I think we'll be doing Wednesdays and Fridays, so look for that content. We're really excited. There's a lot of different kinds of content creators out there and how they're doing it, and I'm not making judgments about any of those people. It's just for Jesse and I personally, like, we just want to be able to share that information with as many people as possible because we think that's important. So look for way more videos coming out on this channel. It's going to be awesome. Some stuff, I did a lot of the filming. It's just really cool content, so look for that. Next thing is there is some merchandise starting to be sold on the No-Till Growers page, so go check that out. There's like t-shirt and hoodies, so if you're interested, there will be more coming up soon, but just check that out. And I have an advertisement here I want to read. I want to tell you all about the brand new courses that Dr. Elaine Ingham is just about to launch. As you may know, Dr. Ingham is considered by many to be the world's foremost soil biologist. She has spent the last 4 decades pioneering research in how plants and microbes work together. Dr. Ingham has helped farmers around the world to reduce their chemical inputs and to simultaneously increase their yield and profits. With knowledge from these courses, you'll be able to use a microscope to identify microbes in the soil, have the skills to help these microbes reproduce, and the know-how to regenerate soil. The all-new Soil Food Web Foundation courses are being launched this Christmas with a special introductory offer of $1,600 off for the first 150 students. If you'd like to join the soil revolution, then please go to www.soilfoodweb.com today. If you guys don't know who Elaine Ingham is, she is an amazing soil biologist, and I think all of us have been influenced by her work in some way. And so we're really happy to have her involved in the show here, and we're actually going to have Elaine on January 7th on Growers Live. So I'm really looking forward to that. She's been a guest on the podcast and someone I'm just really excited to connect with. And she'll be able to take your questions. So look for that. We also have Dan Brisebois next week, and then the 24th and the 31st are Christmas and New Year's. So we're going to be taking those off. We may put out some content for you guys. We haven't decided yet, but that's sort of the schedule coming up. And one last thing before we get into this, I'm sorry, so many announcements. This will be available as an audio file on the Patreon page. So if you guys want to listen to this later or just in the future, we're going to be putting these up on there for you guys as well. All right, enough announcements. Let's get Shawn on here. Hey, Shawn, how's it going, man?
Hey, very good. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I am so happy. Thank you for coming. If you guys don't know, I don't know if you guys know who Shawn is necessarily. Hopefully you do. But I've visited, I don't know when I was there a couple months. It was still hot out. I remember when I was there. It was a few months ago. And I did a couple of really nice videos. Shawn was really generous with his time. There's like a whole tour of his farm. I was there for a workshop, and then pretty much his whole presentation is online too on my channel. So if you want to check that out. Shawn's a huge wealth of knowledge in terms of no-till farming. And Shawn, if you could just talk a little about your scale, I think that's one thing that distinguishes yourself from a lot of the market gardeners that we all interact with.
Yeah, this year we grew on about a little over 6 acres of land. About half of it has been no-till for the last 4 years or so of all the production that I've done. Next year we're scaling up to about 12 acres of production. So this at Wild Hope Farm, currently managing Wild Hope Farm, we've been doubling every year in our production, so scaling up pretty quick. Been here about 2.5 years now. But before Wild Hope, I managed the organic farm for Clemson University for about 6 years, and then before that worked as an extension agent. And then before that, did some farming in California. So I've been in the farming scene for about 23 years now. Did my first no-till experiments about 20 years ago, but I'm definitely passionate about no-till.
Yeah. I mean, wealth of knowledge, expertise, experience, and the farm that you're at is just insane. I mean, it's just unbelievably beautiful, the property, and you guys have huge goals, and it's super cool. So, um, anyways, that's a little bit of background for Shawn. So I got a couple questions, unless you want to share. I don't know. Do you want to share more about like the expansion plans, your goals for next year, or some more stuff about like what are you guys growing there?
Yeah, we're kind of mixed vegetables. Probably grow about 30 different varieties of vegetables, maybe 28 different varieties of flowers. Our main market's a CSA program. This year we had a 150 share program, which ran for about 28 weeks. And then we also do a farmer's market, one market every weekend. And that has actually been growing and accounts for a lot of our sales now. But we've developed some innovative systems here at the farm. One of the ones I'm most proudest of is we have like an automated CSA pickup system. So we have a refrigerated trailer, and then we automated the access control of that trailer. So, because one of the problems with farmers markets and CSA pickups is the customer has a very limited time to pick up the produce. And the produce stays out of refrigeration, so it's degrading in quality. So we have the refrigerated trailer, we park it in different places, and then our customers have an access key or an access code, and they can go in over a longer period of time. All the produce is in reusable plastic bins, and they just empty the bins into their bags and then leave the bin with us in the trailer, and then saves us a lot of time because we don't have to even unload the trailer, and then they get a higher quality product and they can pick up over a longer period of time.
Yeah, that blew my mind when I saw that. I was like, this is so cool. I mean, yeah, you just set that trailer up, people can get in there. And I love how you say the one innovation. I'm like, Shawn, there's so much cool stuff on your farm. I highly recommend, guys, go check out that video on my channel. I mean, Shawn, yeah, I mean, from the wash pack to some of the little greenhouse systems. Also, yes, Shawn is an author too. And if you didn't know that, you want to talk a little about your.
Yeah.
Oh, so are you in that book too?
Yeah, this book, there's a chapter in here about some of the no-till work that we've done. And this is a pretty cool book. Definitely recommend checking it out, Andrew Medford. And this is a book that I put out in 2016, or Chelsea Green put out in 2016, and shows a lot of the work that I've done over the years.
Yeah, I'll leave a link. I can't do it right now, but maybe Jesse, if Jesse's over in the chat too, so maybe Jesse can put some links in there, but I'll put some links in the description too. Although I think I might have put a link for your book in there already, but I didn't realize you were in the Andrew Medford's book. So yeah, very cool. So as you guys can tell, Shawn has a lot of experience. He's written a book. He's worked in different places. And I think one thing, as I mentioned before, Shawn, that I've been really interested in your work, especially because of the scale of it, because so much of it is, tractor based for larger scale when most of us are using hand tools and very small acreage. And so some of the ways your systems that you have set up are super cool. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what kind of questions come in. I have two questions first from the Patreon page. And if you guys don't know this, if you guys want to submit questions through there ahead of time, those are the first questions that we ask the guests. So if we do run out of time, eventually these questions will definitely get answered. So guys, if you haven't already, please hit the like button and also throw your questions over in the comments. Jamie Davis says here, hey Shawn, what's your experience with fire ants and cutworms in a roller crimper system? Fire ants seem to thrive just fine under tarps, and while we didn't have them 10 years ago, they've quickly become our worst pest. Farming aphids, taking out new transplants, etc. On the other hand, we have fewer issues with cutworms since introducing occultation. Even there is substantial residue left after tarping. Do you have any issues with cutworms in crimped and mulched cover crops? Thanks.
Haven't had any issues with cutworms. We do have fire ants, I would say, is our major pest problem right now. Mainly have problems with fire ants in the fall crops. Haven't had any issues with our spring crops or in our roller crimped crops, but it seems like the fall crops, put them in the ground, the fire ants seem to like disturbance and bare ground, and then they basically eat our seedlings and eat a lot of the seeds, but it's mainly seedling damage. They'll eat them in the seedling stage. A lot of the brassicas, we had carrots eaten this year, and beets. It seems like they were turnips. They were just going after everything and just probably lost 50% of our fall crops to fire ants. So one strategy that I think worked actually with the fall, because we do no-till with our spring crops, but I think what helped in the fall was tilling. I was doing a permanent bed system where I was maintaining permanent beds and just doing very light cultivation on those permanent beds. And I think the fire ants, it was less disturbance, less like deep tillage, and the fire ants kind of favored that. But this summer I had a field where I basically went through with the disc harrow and did a deeper full tillage and just destroyed all the beds. But that seemed to help with the fire ants because it took them longer to get back in. That kind of prevented them for about 2 weeks. But yeah, they're a pain. And I think next year my strategy is going to be to for the fall crops maybe to do more tillage, and then maybe surrounding the field, because you can't apply baits in the field, but surrounding the field, maybe putting it out of fire ant bait to slow their movement back into the field. We need to check with our certifier and see if we can do that in our organic system or not first.
So is it pretty shallow tillage that you're talking about?
No, in the past, that's what with the permanent bed systems, that's all I was doing. But the disc harrow probably tills maybe 4 to 6 inches deep, so it's pretty deep tillage, I would say.
Okay, and that's been effective with the ants, but only for a few weeks. Is that what you said?
Yeah, basically gives you about 2 weeks of control with the fire ants. And if you can do a bigger area, and that's the problem, the smaller you are, it makes it more difficult to do that. Like a lot of the bigger growers in California didn't have problems with gophers because they're like tilling these massive fields, and then it takes a while for the gophers to move back in. So it's kind of like similar with fire ants. I think you're probably doing a lot of destruction when you do that tillage, and then it takes them a little while to move back in.
Okay. Is there any? I mean, I get asked this about fire ants too. I just haven't experienced them here yet. I'm sure they will be at some point, but in the South, I know they're common. Are there any other remedies other than what you've tried? Like, have you tried stuff that didn't work?
Well, in the roller crimped areas where we're doing our no-till, I don't see a lot of fire ants in those areas. We did get some fire ants in our eggplant, now that I think about it. But it wasn't, my harvest manager didn't like it, but I didn't think it was horrible.
So you think there's less fire ants in the non-tillage, the no-till area?
Yeah, in the roller crimped area, I would say there's less. Now it's just all anecdotal. It'd be interesting to do an experiment. I know with the roller crimp stuff, definitely seen a huge reduction, almost complete reduction in thrips and onions. And then also cucumber beetles. There's a massive reduction in cucumber beetles, and then also squash bugs. I don't see as many problems with squash bugs in the roller crimp stuff.
Okay. But you haven't done like a side by side in the same field block, so you don't know.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't done any true experimentation, just kind of trials.
Okay. Are the ones where there's more fire ants, are those like older beds that you've like from your first year or whatever, or are they?
Fire ants, they're just everywhere.
They're just everywhere. Okay.
I was thinking of, but.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
Are there like any things you can apply that you know of to like take care of them, or?
There was a spinosad-based bait, and I tried that at my house in Anderson, and it wasn't effective at all. My friend Trad Cotter was trying to develop like a fungus that would kill fire ants, and he tested it out a few years back at the Clemson farm, and that wasn't effective. So I'm not aware of anything effective. It's a non-native species that was brought in from South America, so we really just don't have the biological controls here to keep it at bay. Like in South America, you don't see as many fire ants because they have more biological controls there. But I know they released the forward fly, and the forward fly has been found in all the states where the fire ants are. But it's just like one biological control agent, and I think in South America they really have like 10. So I think without the other biological controls, we'll never get really good control of the fire ants.
So I know you mentioned that there's no like controlled experiment there between your crimp no-till areas and the tilled areas. Do you have any like idea why that might be a difference?
No, but yeah, next year we're going to do some experimentation with, because what I'm trying to develop is a summer cover crop mix that we can crimp and then plant fall crops into. So I haven't really perfected that yet, but I'm getting closer. And then I think next year we're going to do some trials, actual research where you have tilled areas, and then we're looking at different cover crop mixes at different rates, and we're going to see what works the best.
Okay. Cool. There's some comments in here. Someone's Weaver Acres is talking about IC3. It's a product that says rosemary oil, wintergreen oil, and geraniol. I don't know about this product. So, someone else has mentioned they use a torch and burn them. Have you thought about like flame weeding?
Yeah, the problem with the fire ants is that you really have to kill the queen
Okay.
for it to be effective, and the queen is deep down in the
Underground.
soil usually, yeah, underground. So the fire doesn't get that deep, and then that's the problem with just poisons and sprays. They have this system where the feed when the ants take the feed goes through different casts, and the queen is the last to get that feed. So they hit and regurgitate it, and then the next cast eats it. And then if any ant dies along that path, they know that their food is contaminated, and they throw it out. So they have this whole system to protect the colony. So they're kind of pretty tricky to kill,
Okay.
pretty tenacious.
But you said it took out 50% of some of your crops?
Yeah, I would say we lost 50% of our fall crops to fire ants,
Wow.
eaten in the seedling stage. Yeah, pretty
Okay.
crazy.
Yeah, that's definitely something you can't
Now,
ignore. You have to.
yeah, with the brassica seedlings, the transplants usually in the fall, about 2 to 3 days after you put them out. The fire ants, I don't know, I think maybe the potting soil, there's something about it that they're really attracted to, but they tend to congregate right around the base of the plant and soil there, and then just girdle the seedling and it'll fall over. So if you get out there, 2 days later and you notice them in there and you notice their activity, you can do like a root drench with Pyganic or with Entrust, which is spinosad based, and that will kill them. Once the brassica seedlings are tall enough or big enough, then they're resistant to the fire ants. But in that young seedling stage, there's probably like a week or two where they're highly vulnerable.
Okay. Any idea about, there's a question here about, what's the natural predator? I know you said that and I don't expect you to know all this stuff. I'm just wondering if you know that, what's a predator for a fire ant, in places where they are native?
The forward fly, which has been released, it's a parasitoid fly. I think it doesn't eat a lot of them, but it hovers around the colonies, and it scares them so they don't feed as much, and then reduces the populations that way.
Okay,
But I
and those
think
don't exist.
they've been released in the States, but we just don't have the whole host of biological organisms that are required for really good control.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked to some of the people that were doing the releases of those, and they said that they found them in every state now. I was like, can we get them released on the farm? And they're like, no.
Can you buy box of beneficial, you can buy beneficial insects? Can we get those?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to. I don't know. They said that they're there, and there's no need to buy them, but you can't purchase them anywhere is a thing. I searched around last year. I was like, I'm going to get them this year, and wasn't able to find them. So it's not something you can buy.
Okay. You probably have to buy a lot of them too. And they
Yeah,
have to have somewhere to live, right? They're not if they eat all of the ants, then they're not going to be around after that anyways, right?
not sure. Good
I guess you
question.
can't buy them, so it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. That was a lot of talk about fire ants. Okay. Basically, we don't have a good solution for it, I guess
Yeah.
there's some comments over here about the drenching, that IC3. So I don't know. I can't say yes or no about it. I don't know anything about it, but Weaver Acres had some good results with it. So,
I'm
um,
writing that down right now. IC3.
yeah, IC3 said that mound drench each population. It's a soil treatment targeted and won't damage to crops. So thanks, Weaver Acres. Um,
Yeah, those mound treatments are hard because there's so many mounds that you miss. I remember as an extension agent, they were like, "Don't ever recommend mound treatments because you're going to miss half the mounds."
okay.
So it is difficult if you just do mound treatments. That's why they always recommend the baits, but then you can't use that in organic systems
Okay.
or
Well,
conventional systems.
right, right. Well, all right. He's had he or she. I don't know. I don't know Weaver Acres. I've seen you guys on here, but I don't know you personally. So yeah, they say that it's been really effective for them. Um, so another Patreon question here. So you guys, it'd be great if you guys get some questions in for Shawn. But we'll take one more question from the Patreon members here. Hi, Shawn. In your No Till Growers podcast, you didn't talk a lot about sources of fertility. Is it all coming from leaves and cover crops, or are there other inputs? Also, what is the soil type, and what are the fertility levels like? Thanks.
Um, yeah, our fertility is pretty good. Our pH is good in all our, we have low pH in one of the fields, limed that pretty heavily and was able to bring it back up. All of our fields, some of our fields are a little low in phosphorus and potassium. But overall, I think our nutrients are pretty good. Boron seems to be a micronutrient that our soils lack. I think it's leached out pretty readily. But our soils are kind of a clay loamy clay. And then you go down about 6 inches and it's almost pure clay. But most of our fertility comes from cover cropping, just trying to like recycle as many nutrients as we can, and then also using nitrogen fixing crops to bring in the nitrogen. And then been making up the difference with some things require more than what our cover crops can give them. And our field that was low in phosphorus and potassium, all our fertilization is based on soil testing. So the field that was low in phosphorus and potassium, I supplemented with a Nature Safe product that was had a nutrient rating of 855. It's basically feather meal, blood meal, meat meal, blood meal, bone meal, sulfate of potash, and I think that's about it. I've also supplemented with a 10-2-8, and this year for the first time we actually I installed a fertigation system, and then after I installed the fertigation system, I realized that all the fertigation fertilizers are extremely expensive, and the one that I wanted was like $108. Nature Safe makes a fertilizer that you can fertigate, but it was like $108 for like a 50-pound bag, and it was only like 15% nitrogen. So I ended up actually going with Chilean nitrate, which it's not the best for the soil, but it's super cheap. And then we can kind of spoon feed the nitrogen to the plants using our fertigation system, which is key during droughts because a lot of our irrigation is through drip. And if you have a rain event, if most of your nutrients are coming from cover cropping, you need the rain to basically wash those nutrients down into the roots of the plant. So if you have a drought and it hasn't rained in a while, the plants won't be able to access that fertility that's provided by the cover crops because only that wetted area where the drip tape is where they're going to be able to access the nutrients from. So being able to give them a little bit of extra nitrogen through the fertigation system, I think is key during drought times. And this year it didn't rain for 6 weeks straight. So that was key to keep our plants, a lot of the heavy feeders happy.
Right. And I know, obviously, because I've been to your farm, I know you have basically 3 fields, and some of them are not. I mean, they're not near each other. So, is the soil very different between the 3 fields?
A little bit. Let's see. Yeah, field 2 is, we have 3 fields. Field 1 is probably the best, has the most fertility. Field 2 is probably the lowest, and field 3 is pretty good. Field 3 we haven't grown in yet, just cover cropped it. We've basically been cover cropping it for an entire year before we even start growing in it. It's actually going through more than a year of cover crop before the plants actually hit the ground or growing. So that's going to hopefully help bring a lot of the nutrient levels up to where we need them to be.
Cool. Yeah, if you guys don't know, Shawn's a huge advocate of cover cropping and spending a lot of time building his soil naturally with plants. As Shawn just mentioned, over the course of a year to prepare new fields. So it's really cool. I really highly recommend you check out Shawn's work. Let's see what other questions we have here. Um, where do you get your soil testing done through?
Um, we do yearly tests through Clemson University, and then when we first started, we kind of did a baseline test with the Cornell test, which are a lot more expensive. And then I think we're going to try to do those every 5 years, maybe every 3 years, 3 to 5 years on the Cornell tests, which look at a lot more than the Clemson's tests do. But we also test for organic matter every year too, which is kind of a separate test. And our organic matter is really high in our fields. It's, around 4.8% in all of our fields.
Okay. And do you find that, so you're not really, for amendments, you just mentioned those and then cover crops. You're not adding like compost or manures or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I should mention that actually. We just started a partnership with the neighboring farm that's a horse farm. And basically, he's going to be able to provide us with enough horse manure and bedding to fertilize all of our fields. So we won't have to basically bring in any more phosphorus and potassium. We're still going to probably run into problems with, or nitrogen. We shouldn't have to bring in any based on the calculations that I've done. But he basically drops off, about 15 cubic yards of manure and bedding per week is what we're getting from him now. So a pretty massive amount. And then right now we're composting it and extracting the heat from the compost to heat our greenhouses. So we'll do that in the wintertime. And then we've got a manure spreader. We'll put it straight on the field or straight on the cover crops. But yeah, lots of horse manure.
Okay. That's cool that you've made that connection. I'm sure they're happy to dump it off at your place as well.
Yeah, they're happy to get rid of it. So it's a really good symbiotic relationship. We had to buy a dump trailer, so we have this huge dump trailer to make the whole thing possible. But I think it's going to pay for itself within a year or so of use. Because, adding those amendments can be expensive.
Okay. Question here is, what can someone use for short-term cover crops in between high and by rotation crops in the southeast?
My favorite short-term cover crop is buckwheat. If you just have like a month or so, buckwheat is great, germinates quick. And 40, 50 days, you're going to have flowers. And once a cover crop gets about knee high, it's going to more than pay for itself. Another good short season one would be like Japanese millet would be a good grassy short season or short cycle cover crop. Sun hemp can get pretty big, produce quite a bit of biomass too in a short amount of time. So that would be another good one. And cowpeas, I would say if you have 60 days, definitely cowpeas are good as well.
Okay, but you said buckwheat maybe like 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, buckwheat is probably the quickest.
Okay. Will that germinate in the heat?
Does germinate in the heat, but it likes moisture. So a lot of times it could be hard to get to grow late in summer, or in the middle of summer if you're not getting any rains. But if you have irrigation, you can definitely get it going.
Okay. Yeah, I know millet will germinate in the heat. So I think we talked about this when I was there. I mean, I was using it just for pasture stuff for my chickens, but that was like one of the few crops that'll germinate like middle of the summer for me.
Yeah, millet's awesome.
Yeah. And the Japanese millet too. Can you talk a little bit about the different millets?
Yeah, for chickens, I think if you just have a pasture and you have chickens roaming through it, I think brown top is probably the best for that because it's really short. Then it'll produce seeds that the chickens can then access. It's not like too tall for the chickens to eat the seeds off of it. But for the other, for cover crops for vegetables, one of my favorites is Japanese millet. But it does produce seed after I think about 50 days, and you have to be careful. If it does go to seed, there'll just be a weedy mess in there the following year, the following season. So you have to be really careful with Japanese millet. Pearl millet, I've grown that, and I had problems with chinch bugs and rust. so it didn't do very well. But that gets a lot taller.
It gets huge.
Yeah, really pretty. You can probably sell the seed heads as cut flowers too, or put it in cut flower mixes. That one gets huge.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. They look like I forget those. I forget what they're called. Yeah, they're just like.
Yeah, what's that wetland grass?
Yes, yeah. I know that's exactly what I'm thinking of too.
Yeah,
you see them in like marsh areas and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, cattails.
Cattail. Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, you got up to that point, but they're so tall. Like my chickens couldn't reach them. Like.
Yeah.
You know, and the stalks get pretty thick on the Japanese millet too. The Japanese pearl millet. The pearl millet. Yeah. Cool. Let's see some more questions here. Let's see. Your main market stream is CSA. Wait, how big were you last year for CSA members, and what's your goal for the next year?
I think last year we were around maybe 100 CSA members. Next year our goal is to be at 342.
That's a pretty specific number, Shawn.
Yeah, and this year we're at 150. 340-ish.
Okay, 340-ish. All right. Are you using a customizable CSA program, or is it just
No, this year I've been very resistant to do even different size CSA baskets, but this year they talked me into doing 2 sizes. So this fall was like the first time we've ever done that. First time I've ever done that. But we have really good team, and our harvest manager is really good, so it kind of makes that kind of thing more possible.
I was gonna say, Rachel would just be able to take care of that, right?
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, this fall we did a regular size and then a small size. So I think we're gonna continue that next year.
Okay, but the items are set, like you can't customize.
Yeah, it's not customizable beyond that. And
okay.
Yeah, it's hard with our trailer system to offer more than 2 sizes because when you walk into it, there's just huge stacks of bins on top of pallets. So if someone had, a customizable bin on the bottom of the stack, you'd never be able to get to it.
How many shares can that trailer hold?
I just figured this out. It can hold about 108. Okay. Depends on the size. With the 1 bushel, the 1 bushel size bins, it can hold 108. And if you did a smaller bin than that, I can actually look that up. I've got the.
You're gonna say 342? No, I'm just kidding. That's where that number comes from.
A lot more.
Okay.
But yeah.
Cool. I know there's a lot of CSA farms are now getting to like a pretty much a fully customizable box. Not to say that that's what it needs to be done in every market, but I think there's a lot of people now like trying to become more competitive with the CSA program and offering that. And there's a lot of cool software options out there. I've talked to a few farms that have like really done well with that. I'm not trying to convince you, Shawn. I'm not saying that you have to get into that, but I've seen some good experience with it. John McCafferty is saying, looking at your Instagram, I noticed a photo of a before and after shot of cover crop beds. It looked like the bed had a huge amount of wood chips as mulch. Is that something you guys do on the farm?
Yeah, my mulch preference is to use leaves. We had a pretty major logging operation on the farm this past year, and we were able to get a massive amount, probably about 400 cubic yards of wood chips from that. So this year we've been using the wood chips, and I like to add them on top of the roller crimped mulch. So I'll crimp the cover crop, and that gives you about 6 weeks of weed control, and then I'll add wood chips or leaves on top of that, and that'll give you about 6 months of weed control. And this winter we did something really fun where add the wood chips to our peppers and our eggplant because they're in the ground for so long, they need that extra amount of weed control. And at the end of the year, they were perfectly weed free come, November. And so what we did is we just mowed them down with a flail mower, planted garlic through the mulch residue. That was basically the crimped cover crop with the wood chips on top. Just put the garlic bulbs right through that, or the garlic cloves right through that. And then we added another light layer of wood chips on top of that. And garlic. So it was like double no-till. Garlic came up perfectly. Looks great.
So what's the plan with all the wood chips? Did you already say that?
Well, if you're using wood chips, what I like to do is follow the wood chips with the cover crop of cowpeas. Cowpeas can tolerate the immobilization of the nitrogen if you're tilling the wood chips into the ground. But with the situation with the eggplant and the peppers, we basically just never tilled after the wood chips. We added the wood chips on top of the crimped mulch, and then we basically just planted right through those wood chips and then added more wood chips on top of that. So it's just like a continual mulching system. But we add all of the mulch, all of the wood chips with a manure spreader. Wood chips are the leaves with a manure spreader, so we can add a massive amount really quickly, which allows us to do that mulching on a larger scale.
Okay. And so you're saying that for eggplants and peppers, you would mulch it with wood chips, and then when that's done, you plant the garlic in there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just mow the eggplant and peppers, and then plant garlic right through it. The peppers and eggplant roots are still in the ground, but they're winter killed.
Right.
And then the garlic comes up. Just add another layer of wood chips on top of that.
Okay. And then in the spring, what's the plan then with that bed? Because you got all the wood
Well,
chips.
it's got a very thick amount of wood chips on it now. So what I've been doing in the past, like when the garlic comes out, what I did last year, we had wood chip mulch on the garlic last year, and garlic came out. Then I planted a cover. I tilled all of that into the ground, tilled the wood chips in, and then planted cowpeas.
Okay.
And then terminated the cowpeas, tilled the cowpea residue into the ground, and then planted fall crops into that area.
Okay. Okay. So you're not going to keep rotating that through. It's in terms of the same system, you'd go into another section to do that setup, like the eggplant.
Yeah, and it might, next. I mean, if it's weed free enough, I might just continually just add more wood chips and add more wood chips. The risk is that we might get perennial weeds in there. Like I saw a few sprigs of Bermuda grass that were starting in that bed, and then of course the mulch isn't going to be effective on the Bermuda grass. So I think over time you'll get a problem with perennial weeds and a continual no-till system. If you can stay on top of those, hand weeding them out, you might be able to get them in control. But doing that disturbance every now and then helps with those perennial weeds for sure.
Okay. And you find that, like, by pushing the wood chips in the ground, the cowpeas will, in the amount of time that takes, like, that will free up the nitrogen from the wood
Yeah, because the
chips?
cowpeas produce actually an excessive amount of nitrogen, and that nitrogen usually leaches out of the ground. So it is still pretty wood chippy at the after you tilled in the cowpeas and the wood chips. So some crops don't like that, like brassicas don't usually like undecomposed residue, but cucurbits can tolerate it. Onions can tolerate it. Some things can tolerate more than others, so just kind of have to pick the right plants.
Okay. So the question here is,
next year after, it's just amazing because you have so much organic matter. 2 years after the wood chips, it's really incredible. So.
yeah, and I know, like, in the South, the wood chips do break down fairly quickly for wood chips, just with the heat and humidity.
Mm-hmm. And it also depends on the type and quality of the wood chips too. Like if you have wood chips that you get from like the utility pruners are pretty good because they have a lot of leaves and smaller branches mixed in with it. Unfortunately, the wood chips we have from the logging operation are just like big chunks of wood. There's no bark, there's no leaves, there's no small branches, so definitely decomposes a lot slower.
Yeah, I've gotten a variety of wood chips. One pile I got, which pretty much took me most of the season, was from some trees they were taking out on our property, and it was mostly just, they were pretty small, but it was all wood. I just got a delivery, I don't know, a month or two ago, and it's just like half pine needles. Like, it's just, it's just totally different, but I'm just using it for mulching like walkways and stuff, so not putting it in my beds. But yeah, I think it varies a lot, and probably the type of wood too, right?
Yeah, I'm not too picky. Right now we're using cedar wood chips, and everyone says cedar is the worst. And
That's what you got, right?
hasn't seemed to have a negative effect.
Why do you think? Why does the claim about cedar? What's the story with that?
I don't know. I think a lot of times with the wood chips and mulch, people think that they're like going to be leaching chemicals, but from the research that I've done, like all those chemicals decompose after a few weeks, so there isn't really a lot of chemical residue. But it's
Okay.
probably just perception.
Is it that cedar just takes a long time to break down? Because I know cedar is sort of like known as like a more rot resistant wood for construction materials and stuff. Does it just take forever to break down?
Yeah, the heartwood is pretty rot resistant, but then the sapwood is similar to pine, so it kind of depends on. Yeah.
So David Blanchard's asking here, how do you add fertility to the garlic planted through the wood chips? But I guess you answered that already with the cowpea cover crop, and because you're not really
Yes,
like,
the garlic was just planted right into, the residue of this year, the residue of the uh, eggplant and peppers. So what I'll do, come like February, there's a lot of fertility still from the cover crop residue that was from the winter previous, which was cereal rye and crimson clover. And that's what the eggplant peppers were planted into. So a lot of that is still providing nutrients. And then you have to factor in the actual organic matter percentage in your soil too. So for every 1% organic matter that you have, you're going to get about 10 pounds of nitrogen. So at 4.5% organic matter, we're getting about 45 pounds of nitrogen just from the organic matter. And then I'll come back. I think it's really beneficial to like fertilize the garlic in March. It's a good time to fertilize it, and I'll help beef up those bulbs. So that can be done with either, top dressing with like a nature safe granular type fertilizer, or spoon feeding it in through the fertigation system.
okay, but so there's enough fertility in the ground before you even plant the eggplants and peppers that'll carry you through March with the garlic.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think about fertilizing garlic until March.
right. They're probably not taking up much in the cold months, anyways.
Yeah, exactly. They're just kind of sitting there until it warms up.
Okay. Um, yeah, there's some comments here about horse manure and having herbicides in the manure. And I know that's a conversation that comes up a lot when people talk about using horse manure. But you know the source of your manure, like the people, and I guess you know what the horses are eating and if there's herbicides around.
Yeah, so luckily we know the horse farmer and he knows the hay grower. So it's kind of a closed chain, so we can be pretty careful about, or we can be pretty certain that we're not getting those persistent herbicides. But I have had problems with that using straw as a mulch in the past, and somehow the straw was contaminated, even though the neighbor said he never sprayed it. It still had some residue, but yeah, I'm definitely always concerned about that.
Okay. Yeah,
Careful.
I'm. That question's definitely come up on the show before. I think when we were talking to Charles Dowding, there was some questions about that too. But I think it's about knowing your sources, right? And just like whatever where they fed, where's that from, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and there's also weed seed issues with the horse manure too. But
That
yeah,
passes through the horse as well.
yeah, so you got to be careful about that.
Okay. But you guys are composting that before you're using
Um,
it?
yeah, some of it we're composting, and I'd like to. This is like the first year we've done the horse manure. I'd like to get onto a system where everything is getting heat treated with the composting process before we apply it in the field, just to make sure that it's weed seed free.
Okay.
But yeah.
Cool. Let's see here. Are you using sets for your onions?
Yes, we grew the onions out in the high tunnel in the ground, and actually didn't produce enough this past year, so we ended up buying sets too. But they performed just as well as the ones that we grew in the high tunnel. But yeah, plant those in the high tunnel in January, like the 1st of January, and then usually they'll be big enough to transplant come
Okay.
March.
What's in your high tunnel right now? Are you growing all winter in there?
Yeah, this year we're experimenting with a winter CSA. So we're going to do a 4-week winter CSA in January. So right now the high tunnel has kale, pak choy, napa cabbage, and a stir fry mix, which has 2 different kinds of mustard. What else does it have? Kale. It's like a baby mix. 2 different kinds of mustard, kale, and like a white stem pak choy, and then also a bed of arugula. But I was really inspired by Pam Dowling, by a talk that she gave, and I kind of want to move towards more of her system for winter growing, where she's not really doing any direct seeding and just doing massive amounts of transplants and maximizing the space in the greenhouse over a longer period of time. So this year we're just doing a 1-month winter CSA, but next year we're going to try a 4-month CSA with using 2 high tunnels, kind of alternating back and forth between the 2 high tunnels. And then a lot of our winter CSA stuff will come from storage crops. Like we just pulled out 600 pounds of carrots out of the field, and we have spinach in the field and turnips and radishes. So and we held over some sweet potatoes too. So, we'll have a lot of those storage crops that'll supplement. Then we also have green onions in the field. We'll be able to cover those, keep them until January as well.
Cool. Yeah, I was just at Pam's place a couple weeks ago, and she is not the farm manager anymore there. I think she stopped doing that a couple years ago. But yeah, their tunnel is so packed, Shawn. Like it was, I think they have like 4-foot beds, 1-foot walkways, and it's just like totally packed in there.
Yeah, there's like never any ground showing ever.
No, she was like, we tried to get the walkways even tighter, but they the shoulders would just fall in all the time. But yeah, it was. If you guys don't know who Pam is, she was managing a farm at the Twin Oaks Community Growing for about 100 people there, and their production is just crazy. But their tunnel is, like Shawn, like we think about for CSA or for market gardening is like we have like long rows of stuff, but it was all like broken up. Like it wasn't a whole row of anything there. It was like 30 feet of this, 50 feet of that. But yeah, just super tight production. Yeah, it was just totally maxed out. It was awesome. And she doesn't even heat it, or like she's like, no, it's good. And they're 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours north of me. So, cool. Yeah, I think winter production is awesome if you can make it work. And you guys are going to add another tunnel to the one you guys have now?
Yeah, we're hoping to add another tunnel next fall. And then, we'll have 2 high tunnels. I don't want to go crazy with the high tunnels, but I think with 2 high tunnels, we should be able to do 4 months of a 75 share CSA, 75 to 90 share CSA.
Wow. All right. Very cool, man. Let's see a couple more questions in here. Do you have wireworm problems after long-term cover crops?
Haven't had any wireworm problems. I did maybe like 20 years ago. I remember having an issue like when I first tilled in like a sod, going from sod to crops, and that was in California. Haven't had any wireworm issues since then though.
Okay. Forrest is asking, what about the grand solar minimum?
Say that again?
Yeah, I don't know what this question is. What about the grand solar minimum? I don't even know what that
Grand
is.
solar minimum. Like the minimum sun distance of the sun from the horizon in the wintertime?
I don't know. Forrest, give us a follow-up question on that one.
Yeah.
So, Shawn, we were talking before. Let's talk about something non-farming related for a second. You got a pretty crazy story, something that you wanted to talk about, right?
Oh yeah.
All right, let's hear it, Shawn. Let's hear. Give people some background here.
Okay, so went to the beach with my wife this past weekend and read a pamphlet about shell rings, and was just fascinating to me. And the beach that we were going to, they had just discovered a couple shell rings. And basically shell rings are these oyster deposits that the Native Americans did, and they still haven't figured out the hows or the whys. There's a bunch of theories on the how and why the shell rings formed, but it's still a big mystery. And we went to the beach, and I was determined to figure out what caused that ring-shaped pattern with the oyster deposits, and ended up like having lunch right in the middle of the shell ring, and didn't even know we were in the middle of a shell ring. Drew a circle in the sand, and the shell ring theory came to me, and I started looking into researching it more and more. And I think I figured out the mystery, and I'm just like, it's been the 60-year-old mystery to how they formed, and I'm super stoked, and just been on an archaeological high ever since. I'm getting a little obsessed, my wife says.
Okay, so is this something that's going to have to get published, or do you want to share this information? Like,
Yeah, a bunch of people are telling me that I need to publish, but I mean, I just like posted it on my Facebook page and LinkedIn. I don't have time to publish. I mean, it's fascinating, and I would love to publish, but I just don't really have the time to do it. Let me see if I can explain it. I was researching it earlier. Let's see here.
oh wow,
Can you see that?
yeah,
Okay, so here's let's see here. Here's one of the shell ring deposits. So the basic theory is basically what my theory is that the odor of the oyster shells is what's creating the circular pattern. Scientists determined recently that when the shell rings start, the shells are deposited in 2 locations. And you can see the 2 locations are really close to deep water access. So you have the deep water access over here, and you have these 2 piles where the ring is initiated. And then what happens is they start at one pile, throwing all their waste there, and then after about a week, it starts stinking. So then they move to the other location, and they start feasting there and throw all the oyster shell waste there, and then that pile starts stinking, and they move back and forth. And then what you get is this elongation of oyster shell deposits that correspond with predominant winds, because they didn't want the predominant winds to blow the odor from one pile onto the other pile. So you get this elliptical shape to the shell rings. So it's all based on the odor that was created by the oyster shell deposits, proximity to the deep water of the creek, and then you take both of those factors into account, and you end up getting this not perfectly shaped circle, but you get this elliptical shaped ring that forms as they try to move back and forth to avoid the odor of each pile that was created after about 7 days of feasting on oysters.
So I have not heard about this before. I don't know if any of you guys have, but I had not heard about this before. Sean and I were talking before. So are there a lot of these? Like, are they visible? Are they buried? Like, I don't know. You tell.
They're visible. Some of them are bigger than others. Basically, they're finding a lot more using LiDAR, light detecting radar. Basically, they're able to look at the topography of the ground in a lot more detail. So they're able to find a lot of these. That's how they found the most 2 recent ones on Botany Bay Island, or on Coy Island in Botany Bay, in South Carolina. So yeah, they're still finding them. It's pretty amazing.
All right. Well, when you get bored with farming, Sean, maybe some archaeological stuff is in your future. Who knows? So I guess we don't talk about farming all the time on this show, but cool stuff is cool stuff. What am I going to say no?
Yeah, it all kind of relates. Because in farming, you got to take the wind into account. So the natives are doing the same thing.
Okay, yeah. So they don't have any farmers in this research crew. They're trying to figure these things out, I guess.
Yeah, they just need more farmers in archaeology, I guess.
All right, cool. Let's see. We're coming up on 9 o'clock here. Let's see if there's a couple more questions. We'll do farming related, unless someone has more shell ring questions, or has any shell ring questions. We'll talk those through. But are there any perennials you recommend for market gardeners?
Jerusalem artichokes. When I was at Clemson, we grew quite a bit of Jerusalem artichokes. And that was a pretty good perennial crop. What else would be good? I mean, the berries we have about a half acre of blueberries, or 3/4 acre of blueberries, and we're going to plant about 3/4 of an acre of blackberries this winter. I think the fruits are really good.
How does that do on like a per acre yield? Is that like even close to like annual vegetable production?
It's pretty close. And the first couple years, like next year, you don't get production out of your blueberries till the third year. So the first 2 years, you can basically plant vegetables in between the blueberry rows because they're spaced at every other bed. So next year we're going to be planting. We'll do no-till. Actually, we have a cover crop of cereal rye and crimson clover in between the blueberries right now. And then before that crimson clover and cereal rye, we had a cover crop of cowpeas in between the blueberries, which basically fertilize the cereal rye and crimson clover. And then we'll no-till the crimson clover and cereal rye in between the blueberries, and then we'll plant sweet potatoes into that no-till pathway. And the sweet potatoes will spread into the blueberry areas and help control the weeds underneath the blueberries.
So really taking advantage of this first few non-production years with cover cropping and even growing cash crops there.
Yeah, you can do double duty. But I have a passion for another perennial plant, which I haven't really grown on a farm scale, but I think it'd be interesting to try, and that's called groundnut or Apios americana. It's a perennial tuber. It's a vine. It gets about 6 feet tall, produces an edible bean too, but the tubers are really high in protein, about 3 times the protein of a potato. And it tastes really good. It tastes like a cross between a potato and a peanut.
Okay.
So I'd like to grow that on a larger scale at some point, if I could.
Okay. Will you be able to sell them?
I think so. I
Okay.
think they taste amazing. It was a Native American staple. Yeah.
What about artichokes? You were growing those in South Carolina, you said?
Jerusalem artichokes.
Right.
So that's also called sunchoke. It's related to sunflowers, helianthus.
Okay.
Tall, weedy, invasive, but gives you gas too when you eat them. But some people love them.
Okay. There's a couple questions in here about like how often you till. Is that strategy changing, or to talk a little bit about that? Like, are some beds just completely no till? Are they tilled every so often? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, probably everything is tilled, I would say, once a year. But the areas where we're not doing the no-till, it's kind of like, what's your definition of till? Like when you cultivate, would that be considered tillage? When you're just cultivating like an inch or two in the ground. I like that one show you did on, what is no-till? Is a hoe no-till? Is a rake no-till?
I know.
So there's lots of like levels of tillage, but I would say, we did a whole year of just permanent bed systems where we weren't actually tilling deeper than like an inch or two. We were just using really shallow cultivation equipment. But what I found is that the beds were like collapsing slowly over time. And having issues, as the beds collapsed, made the cultivation harder. So this year I went back to like doing complete tillage and then reshaping the beds. And that seemed to help with the ant problems too. But my strategy is always to till the least amount possible. Tillage is just horrible for the soil. So it's something that I never want to do, never like to do. And I always like to leave the soil bare for as little as possible. So always get a cover crop on there as soon as possible after tilling. And, a lot of times, as a crop comes out, you're basically mowing it, maybe doing a light cultivation and then planting with a cover crop again, so it's not staying bare for very long. I think the longevity of the bareness is more important than the actual tillage operation, Tillage does disturb it. It's horrible for the soil, but as long as you can like get something back growing again as soon as possible, that's the most important thing.
Do you think that you're going to be working on tilling less over time, or is it going the other direction, or about the same? Like, if it's something that you think is important that it's causing harm to the soil, is it something that you're trying to figure out methods to reduce that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to figure out more crops that I can do no-till. Like I'd like to be able to direct seed stuff into our roller crimped cover crops. So corn, if we can direct seed corn and okra. I did an experiment with okra into roller crimped, and that did well. beans. We started planting beans. Now we're doing like all of our onions. So just kind of increasing the amount of stuff that we do in that roller crimped cover crop. And then if we can do our fall crops into a roller crimped summer cover crop, that's really where we can boost up all the no-till that we're doing. So, that looks like, planting a winter cover crop, like cereal rye, crimson clover, and then tilling that into the ground, and then immediately planting a summer cover crop, and then crimping that summer cover crop for your fall crops.
Okay. Can you, I don't think you mentioned this in this show, can you talk a little bit about crimping and how that works and, with the benefits of that?
Yeah, so with crimping, you basically grow your cover crop to a mature stage. That's really important that it reaches the right maturity. With cereal rye, you want the seeds and the heads to be kind of in the milk stage. If you wait too long, they get to a mature stage, and then you're gonna have a weed problem with that cover crop, with the following crop. So you grow your cover crop, you let it get mature, and then you bring this giant steel drum with dull blades on it, and you roll over the top of your cover crop. And that steel drum with the dull blades on it crimps the stems and causes your cover crop to die. So it leaves your cover crop on the surface of the soil, and it's just this thick, probably 4 to 6 inches of mulch. So you're basically just growing your mulch in place instead of bringing it into the farm.
All right, and that breaks down and goes into the soil as well.
Yeah, so over time it's just decomposing, but it gives you about 6 weeks of weed control.
Okay.
And then depending on what cover crop mix you have, like I like to do cereal rye and crimson clover, and then the crimson clover is going to give you a lot of nitrogen. I usually expect to get 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre out of that.
Cool. I know on your scale it might be tough, but have you experimented a lot with tarping?
A little bit. This year? I think it was this year. We couldn't get into the field early enough because it was too wet, and I needed to terminate the cover crop. So we ended up putting out a bunch of landscape fabric that we had, and then it was a permeable landscape fabric, so water did go through it. So it's not like truly tarping, but it did the aquatation trick, killed the cover crop for us.
Okay.
But yeah, on our scale, it's hard. But I do think it could be useful even on our scale if you're trying to get out there early in the spring and having a hard time because it's too wet.
Yeah, I think I know you mentioned that video that I did about like, is this no-till, is this not? And I think there's a lot of, if you guys haven't seen that, it was my response to those questions where people are like, can you use a broad fork? If you use a hoe, is that, I think everyone's definition is different. I think we're all, I shouldn't say we all, but a lot of us are trying to reduce tillage, if not eliminate it as much as possible. And I think people need to not be so dogmatic about some of this stuff in general, because everyone's context is different. And, like Shawn's pushing out to 12 acres, and like you can say, oh, he needs to do this and that. It's like, have you like stood in a field of 12 acres of vegetables or 6 acres of vegetables? Like, you can't be going out there with the same approach to try to grow that much food. It's just not possible. I don't know. Do you get that sort of feedback from people about like no-till and stuff, Shawn, or is that you just kind of stay out of it?
Yeah, I'm not like completely immersed in the scene. I feel like I'm out in the middle of nowhere here, but people, I do get some people questioning it, but it's hard. It's definitely hard at the scale. I think being able to do the amount of no-till that we're doing is pretty impressive with the cover cropping and the roller crimper. We've been able to like really drastically reduce the amount of tractor work that we do and the amount of soil disturbance. And I think that's the most important thing. It's hard to like completely get away from tillage on our scale, but every year we're finding like new ways to take it one more step. New crops. This year we did the garlic, we did the double no-till with the eggplant and the peppers. So that's like a whole nother thing that we're doing no-till now, a whole nother cycle of no tillage. Once we get our corn and our okra, once we can do more of that no-till, that's just going to be a whole nother level as well. So just trying to increase it every year as much as we can. It saves so much time and money. It really makes a lot of economic sense too. So it's not just it's great for the soil, but it's great for savings as well.
I know you've mentioned that before, not in this talk in this conversation, but the amount of money you can save by cover cropping for fertility versus like bringing in amendments. There's a big difference in cost there. Like
Yeah.
growing cowpeas for nitrogen versus like bringing in nitrogen as a source separately. So I think that's a conversation too that on a small scale it may not be as big of a difference, but when you're talking about more acreage, that can make a big difference in cost.
Oh yeah. We save. Cowpeas will give us $600 of nitrogen per acre in like a couple months, so it really saves a lot. But yeah, you have to have the time and the space to like do that cover cropping. Yeah, and on a small scale, you're just trying to maximize as much as possible um, with your cash crops. So it doesn't make sense a lot of times to put it into cover crops.
Cool. So Casey Oswin just showed up. So what's up, Casey? Just want to say
Uh,
hello. Good to see you in here, man. Couple more questions, Sean. I don't want to keep you too late. I know it's getting late for you. Do you have any tips or suggestions on books or courses on farmland or buying land in general? Yeah, that's the question.
that's a good question. I would say with I do a lot of farm designs and looking at land for people. And I think one of the books that was most helpful for me was P.A. Yeoman's Water for Every Farm. That's a really good book about how to like design your land. Putting in your roads and your buildings. Another good book is actually I have right here. Pattern Language is a really good design book and how to lay out your property in towns and cities and beyond. Um, and then of course my book. Don't forget about that one.
We won't, Sean. I'll make sure people find that one. Um, cool. Well, that's good that you have some actual resources there. I think there's still a lot of topics in the farming space that are not covered and are hard to get your hands on. And if you're in an area, like try to find someone like Sean who can help you even. I mean, that's stuff that like you can make a huge mistake but buying the wrong property or setting your farm up in the wrong way, and the amount of money you might spend on a consultant would save you so much money down the road. So if you want to get in touch with Sean, Sean does that. So and he's got a lot of experience and his farm's beautiful. So is that something you recommend to people? Like just have a trained set of eyes on something before you get moving on it?
Absolutely. You want a really good design. Spend a lot of time in the design phase because, every step, once you start farming, every step costs money and counts, takes energy. Every movement, every you position a road wrong, you're going to spend oodles of money maintaining and rebuilding that road. Whereas if you move that road maybe 50 feet to a better location, it's maintenance free. So yeah, just little things really make a huge difference when you're trying to like save time and money on a farm.
Especially with just water management. That's like the whole thing, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think with climate change, it seems like we're getting more intense. Like drought is really easy to combat, with irrigation systems, but it's like too much water is very hard to deal with. So, design your fields so that they drain properly, but you don't want them to you don't want water to move off them so fast that you have erosion. So I like to set up all my beds so that they're sloped really shallow, like 1/4%, no more than a 1% slope. A 1/4% slope is hard to do. It's like a 3-inch drop every 100 feet. But if you slope the beds more than that, then you're going to get a lot of erosion, which is going to be soil loss, which then you're going to have to replace. So that's a lot of money if you're losing soil and nutrients to erosion. So yeah, setting your fields up so that your roads stay dry and your fields drain, but don't drain too fast.
How is that living? I asked you. You had a name for it, like the living walkway or living, like you're planting grass in one of the walkways that would divert water to hold the soil together.
Oh yeah, vegetated waterways.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you ever have water that's moving down an area that's steeper than you want it to be, making sure that that's permanently vegetated with something so that you're not losing soil as the water moves downhill.
How did that work out in that field that I was hanging out with you? You were planting grass, I think.
Yeah, it's been good. The grass is established. So yeah, um, still need to do some work in that field. Have a couple areas that are a little low, but for the most part, the field is draining pretty good, and the roads look good. I'd
Cool.
love
I
to
know
put
that's
gravel.
something like I struggle with is that there's certain parts. I mean, my whole plot is on a fairly steep hill. Well, not steep, but a significant slope. And when it rains hard, like it just moves earth and goes wherever it wants, and you got to give it a path. And I know like the paths I have are kind of just ditches or trenches or whatever. But if there's like anything in there, it just gets washed out. So I've definitely considered planting grass or something in there to just hold the soil together. I think it's definitely an option for sure.
Yeah, yeah, give
Um,
me the mulch and cover crop. That's key as well.
there's a question here from David Blanchard who asked you a question earlier. What seeder are you using into the roller crimped crops? I'm guessing that's a tractor mounted seeder, right?
Yeah, so I do all the cover crops on raised beds now. So I can't use it's hard to use a seed drill. I actually talked to a farmer that was using a seed drill on a raised bed, but they're just super expensive too. So what I'll do is I'll pull the raised beds, I'll broadcast the cover crop seed using like a cone spreader if it's cereal rye. If it's crimson clover, I'll just use a bag seeder. That just walk through the field with the bag seeder, and then after I put the cover crop seed out, then I'll go back and I'll rebed the rebed those beds, and that helps push the cover crop seed in and help gets it incorporated, that rebedding process.
So
So yeah,
essentially, like on a smaller scale, like if we didn't have a tractor, you could just broadcast it and then maybe use a rake or something
yeah,
to cover it
exactly.
up.
On a small scale, even like if I'm planting less than probably an acre, maybe sometimes up to 2 acres, I'll just use a bag seeder instead of the cone spreader. Yep, just broadcast it out. And then on a really small scale, yep, just go back with like a garden rake to help cover the seeds. That would work well. And you can also use, like an earthway seeder or a jang seeder. You could probably use one of those to put the cover crop seeds out too, and plant them in rows. But if you're doing no-till, I think it's important to do the broadcast seeding, because then you'll get less bare spots.
Right, because you can only plant it so close together.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Shawn, anything else you want to add tonight before we sort of wrap things up? I know we covered a lot of different topics tonight. Anything else you want to talk about? Anything
No.
I didn't answer?
Follow us on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. So how can people follow along with what you're doing? That's a good way to bring us out here.
Yeah, I have a coworker who does a great job of posting everything that we're up to, so you can see the day to day and the week to week. Probably on Instagram is probably one of the better ways, and or you sign up for one of our newsletters too. It's a good way. If you go to our website, you can sign up for a newsletter.
Okay. And I'll leave links below, but it's I think it's at Wild Hope Farm. Is that right for Instagram?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Before I get off, David Blanchard's asking. I mean, we talked about this, but is there a seeder that you're pushing seeds when you have the roller crimped cover crops, or are you just broadcasting on top of that?
No, so I would like to get a no-till seeder, but we don't have one of those now. So what
Okay.
I've done in the past is we have a mechanical transplanter, and our mechanical transplanter has a no-till attachment on it. So it's basically got a coulter, which is like a big round blade, and then it's got a ripping shank that goes behind that round blade that rips through the soil. So what I did is I took our mechanical transplanter over the beds, and it cut through the mulch and then ripped through the soil, which basically opened up a line in the mulch for us to go back through with our earthway seeder and plant the seeds.
Okay. Okay. Cool. All right. Awesome, Shawn. Thanks so much for taking the time tonight. I got to come back and visit you guys sometime soon. Say hi to Pina and Rachel and the crew over there. So.
Will do. Love to have you out here again.
All
Thank
right,
you.
I'll have to make a journey. It's such a cool place, and it was fun hanging out. So, thanks so much for being on tonight.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed chatting with Shawn tonight. Just an incredible resource, an incredible farmer. I always enjoy talking to Shawn. Please go check out them on Instagram. And if you are more interested, go check out Shawn's book. And there's a bunch of videos. There's 2 videos on my YouTube channel. And there will be some more content coming out on no-till growers that I talked about before about that like nerdy, detailed stuff. I did a bunch of videos with Shawn. One about his compost heated greenhouse, his nursery is super cool, and some other stuff. So look for that coming up. Anyways, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great night.